Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your attendance. And a bunch of things that we want to cover with you in the community this afternoon. Just to start with, an introduction to our executive team. For those of you that don't know all of these folks, Captain Bill Alfeld, who's in charge of our Criminal Investigation Division, our Assistant Chief Travis Stefanowitz, Captain Matt Christensen, who's in charge of Neighborhood Services Division, might have been dressed as a Grinch earlier today, and Captain Chris Helmick, who's in charge of our Professional Standards Division. Myself and Captain Christensen will be covering a few different areas here today. We want to cover crime statistics and take a little time going over this with all of you in the community so we have a better sense of crime from a crime data factual perspective and explain some things that might not be known or understood. We're also going to talk about the traffic safety team and their first 90-day success, and then I'm happy to also talk about some of the booking and jail issues at the end if there's time and if there's an interest in that. One piece of information, the embargo version apparently had one data error in it, so the new copies are here for your consumption. A couple things that are important for everyone to understand. Calls for service are how the calls come into our dispatch center. What that call for service says, whether it's a disturbance, a fight, or whatever it is, probably on a 50-50 basis is not what the actual incident turns out to be. And so you'll see as we talk about crime data, the top calls for service per beat. And what we focused on here, and this is a new version, our intelligence and analysis people have been working diligently over the past year to be able to bring you a more detailed product. So there's a lot of discussion across the city about crime in certain areas of the city, downtown being one of them, our beat 2. And that's the importance of really covering crime in a city by beat so that you can get a perspective of crime in each beat area. What does it look like? Is it proportional? Are there areas or different crimes that are more prevalent in certain areas and things of that nature? We also use this internally for our crime fighting efforts. So what will happen is going forward is this will be a quarterly report that we'll push out also to the public. Just remember that this report, which is only through November of this year, still has 1 month worth of data that will be added before it's finalized. And as the quarterly reports go out, those will also be, you'll have full year, and year to date for that quarter, right? So just keeping that in mind. So calls for service are a lot of different things. They may not even result in a crime offense. As you know from talking about our mental health calls, that we have a large amount of calls, over 3,300 so far this year, that turn out to be nothing more than a mental health crisis. So it starts out one way, it ends up being something else. So just something to keep in mind from that perspective. Shootings versus shots fired. Another important piece. Okay, a shooting means somebody was shot. A person was shot. If a person is not shot, it's not a shooting. Okay, these are separated out because of the importance and relevance from a crime perspective, a public safety perspective, to all of us and to our public. And so we certainly want to track down people who are shooting people, who are involved in their trigger pullers, the ATF would call them. And that ties into a lot of other things that we've done in the department to help clear these crimes quicker and identify those folks. So a person shot is a shooting. Shots fired is a gun might have been fired, no one's hit. Sometimes people shoot into the air, sometimes they shoot at a car, sometimes they shoot at a house for a variety of reasons. Those are all criminal incidents that we investigate. But just from a reporting perspective, earlier in the week, I think I saw a story about a drive-by shooting in South Fargo. There was no drive-by shooting in South Fargo. Someone fired a gun out of a car. That was the shots fired. And so from not only a honest reporting, if you will, but from a public safety perception, greatly appreciate your understanding of these terms and making sure that when you're doing your reporting that you're doing that accurately. NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, is an FBI system that our department's been involved in probably for since 2020-ish maybe, and it's a national standard. It transitioned over from the Uniform Crime Reporting System of years ago, and there's 2 different ways that data is recorded in NIBRS. And so our data, our intelligence analysts, the numbers that you'll see are crime cases, so robberies, burglaries, things of that nature. And that's what we use it for. We use it to track crime in our city, what's happening where, and how can we attack it. The other, when it goes to the state will convert to the victim count. So if there's more than one victim in a particular crime, they'll add another count to that crime total. So that's why, and I think we've maybe discussed this at the end of last year. The NIBRS data that the state holds will vary slightly, and in some categories will have a few more numbers than our data because they're counting victims versus offenses. So just so you have an understanding of that. And again, each has a different purpose. You know, the NIBRS that the state's put out is looking at victimology, how many victims are affected by crime. And we were looking at crime from how do we intervene, proactively go after, et cetera. So we're looking at offenses and where they're happening. These are our 5 beats that we currently have in the city of Fargo. So you can see that some of them are quite larger. Beat 2 is our downtown beat area, which is the smallest beat. We have officers assigned to each one of these beats 24/7. And again, if you look, and we base this geography based on calls for service, but also reported crime, because as I said, calls for service is one measure of what's going on. Reported crime is a whole other measure, involves more resources, more personnel, et cetera. And then proactive activity in terms of things like traffic complaints, accidents, things that we want to be in front of. Citywide, those are the top 5 calls for service. Again, that doesn't directly correlate with the crime data. That's just what comes into the dispatch center. Those are the 5 most common things citywide. As you can see, we're trending about even because we've got another month of data to add into 2024. So we're going to be around 90-some thousand again, roughly, in terms of total calls for service. This number also includes the calls that go to our online reporting system. Those are also investigated by our transitional duty personnel, and we've made a number of good arrests and correlated them to other crime activity. So that online system, I think another important piece for the community to know is monitored. We work on that. In fact, this year was very significant in clearing a very expensive situation where that guy was going around town cutting cable wires. It was through the DOORS reporting and our intelligence analyst work that we were able to actually pull video and connect and identify that suspect, and cleared up a really hefty amount of damage that Midco Cable had suffered as a result, and then all of the outages for the community. So looking citywide at our types of crimes, and we're looking at what are referred to as our Group A offenses, which are the majority of crimes that people would be concerned with. And so we call those out, and that's the way it is in the NIBRS report as well. So a couple of things from a citywide perspective. That one, okay. A couple things that you'll notice are aggravated assaults are trending down. So we do have another month of reporting, but overall from 22 to now, trend down citywide in ag assaults. Same thing with our simple assaults. Our rapes, sexual assault, trend up from last year compared to 22, a little bit down, so they might end up being kind of flat, but still an area that we keep a close eye on. Our burglaries are trending down. We still have a month left again, but appear to be in a downward trend. One thing that is up across the city that we noticed over the last 2 years significantly is shoplifting, and we'll go over that in some of the beat areas. Theft from building and theft from motor vehicle are a couple of the ones that are significantly increased. And if you look at the bottom, our total Group A offenses, we're trending down there as well from the last year and the year before. Again, we'll have to add in December, but it looks like a pretty good downward trend. So now we're going to go beat by beat and just walk through this, and then I'll be happy to take questions at the end. Beat 1, this is North Fargo, all the way up by the airport, down to First Avenue North there. We're currently in Beat 1 right now. We're on the southern fringe of it. If you look at current crime in Beat 1, our ag assaults trending down. Simple assaults are kind of flat. Looks like we'll end up flat, similar. Burglaries are on the upward trend a little bit. Motor vehicle theft is trending down. Robberies in our Beat 1 are trending down. You'll see overall robberies across the city have remained pretty much flat, stagnant. They haven't gone up or down. Certain beats have fewer. Shoplifting, again, is on an upward 2-year trend. Overall Group A offenses, we're probably going to be pretty close to last year's number in Beat 1. One thing to note here is the shootings and shots fired. So I'll have a separate slide in each beat for those. I think this gives everyone a better perspective about where some of the violent crime is happening, and you likely will be able to see that it's fairly spread out across the city and the different beats. Beat 1 had 1 shooting last year, and they had 5 shots fired. So actually, slight uptick in that activity in that particular beat area. Beat 2, our downtown area. Okay, we'll start with the shootings and shots fired, which are significantly down a bit over the last 2 years. This year we've had 2 shootings downtown and 1 shots fired, same thing as last year. Again, we've got one month left, but those types of crimes are down in our downtown area. You'll notice that, again, the rape, the sexual assault is flat. But the other interesting piece is our ag assaults, which appear to be trending down from last year. They might be even with 2022, so trending down or even. Our simple assaults are most definitely downward trending. Motor vehicle theft, significant downward trend. Murder, those are small numbers, obviously. In 2022, there was 2 in beat 2. There's been 0 over the past 2 years in the downtown beat. Robbery is a flat number. Theft from motor vehicle, theft from building, again, both on the increase. And if you look at the total A offenses at the bottom for 2024 through November, looks like a pretty significant downward trend for that downtown beat area. Now, this does not negate the fact that there's a lot of concern and issues happening in our downtown area that have to do with homelessness, addiction, mental health. That's also spread across the city, but there's a big focus on our downtown for obvious reasons. But I think it's important to note that from a factual crime perspective, our downtown is doing pretty good, and it's actually on a decent downward trend in most of the categories. Beat 3 is actually an area where we're seeing some more activity from a violent crime perspective. So if you look at the shootings and shots fired, beat 3, slight uptick. They had 1 additional shooting from the year before. Shots fired about the same. Overall, there's a decrease from a 2-year perspective, but we're certainly keeping an eye on that activity in beat 3. The ag assaults, very significant downward trend there in that particular beat. Murders are up 1. They had 2 so far in 24 compared to 1 last year. Robbery slight uptick in beat 3 from last year. 23 versus 16. Theft from building, theft from motor vehicle, pretty much across all beats is up as well. But also, if you look at the total Group A offenses for beat 3, pretty significant downward trend. We'll see how the year ends up, but at this juncture, that piece looks good. Beat 4. Some people would probably say no violent crime occurs on the south side of Fargo, and this is an important thing to understand. Shootings and shots fired in beat 4. Shots fired, flat over the last 3 years roughly, and 1 shooting per year. This is a southeast part of town. Aggravated assaults and simple assaults are both on a downward trend. Burglaries on a downward trend. Motor vehicle theft on a downward trend. Shoplifting is significantly up over the past 2 years. And again, our sexual assaults are up over a 2-year period as well. Total numbers, if you look again at the bottom, overall, fairly strong downward trend. Beat 5, southwest area of the city. They've had 5 shots fired. There's an uptick there, and about average amount, 2 shootings over the last 3 years on average per year. Other significant downward trends, again, both in aggravated and simple assaults, burglary, motor vehicle theft. Shoplifting is up here, pretty significant as well. Robbery's flat, murder's flat. They've had 1 murder in this beat for the last 3 years, 1 each year. And sexual assaults also on the higher end over a 2-year period, right about the same. Total offenses at the bottom, again, fairly strong downward trend without the last month of data included. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any particular questions about crimes, and with the understanding that we will start pushing this out quarterly so that everyone's informed and has that information readily available. Yes, sir.
I'm Dave Clemens. Dave Clemens. I serve in the Senate on District 16, which is West Fargo mostly, but also part of Fargo. I've had a constituent talk to me about traffic violations and so forth, and according to what he told me, the law enforcement in Fargo can't do some things they'd like to because of restrictions on the state side. Statutes that are probably preventing some further law enforcement. So I guess I'm here to see if there is something that we can work for in the legislature to help out on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Actually, we've been working with legislators over the past couple sessions on a couple things. One is the ability to increase the fines for dangerous driving. And Captain Christensen's going to come over and cover that data here in a second on our traffic safety team and the impact they've had on that, even though, it didn't start till this fall. But we need that, and also the owner liability bill, and both of these things will be going before the legislature. I've actually been working with Representative Schauer on the owner liability bill, which addresses the fleeing vehicles, and when you see that data, you'll see exactly what the problem is. We have a extremely high, inordinate amount of vehicles that just don't stop for our officers when we try and enforce or stop them for a traffic violation. This, of course, is a greater risk to the public because they'll speed off and go whichever way they go. And unless there's some type of felony or weapon crime involved, we're not going to pursue them for that traffic violation. So I think you'll probably be amazed at the numbers, and this has been consistent over the past several years and continues to increase. So we definitely could use help from the legislature on the owner liability bill and our ability as a city to increase the fine amounts for that dangerous driving. We're locked in at a very low fee rate that almost makes it, there's no deterrent effect whatsoever. Thank you. Any other questions? Crime-wise? Yes.
So I got a couple of questions here. It seems like downtown, even though it's the smallest, it's still not quite rising up to the level of crime in other areas. How do you feel about the area that it covers? And just for public knowledge, how would you explain how the level of crime is there when it comes to how small it is?
Well, your downtown area's got a lot of bars and entertainment. It's your entertainment district, right? So it's not unusual in any area where you've got an entertainment district to have upticks in certain types of activities. Just like the shoplifting is most prevalent in our areas where we've got the larger, your Scheels, your Walmarts, that kind of thing. And so really at the basis, in fact, if you look at, we just take a peek at B2 from the assault perspective, and we didn't drill these out today, but we've done this before. We did pull out domestic violence related assaults, and so if you look at B2 of the 91 aggravated assaults, 18 are domestic violence related. The simple assaults, 80 are domestic violence related, 24% and 20% respectively. If we did one more analysis and said how many of these are related to fights in bars, you'd see another significant percentage of those assaults in that. And the key takeaway is that your average citizen who is anywhere in the city of Fargo really moving about and enjoying life, it's not that common for them to be a victim of a crime. But in certain things where we've got bars and drinking and other things and late at night activities, we do see an increase in those assaults. And we've also had, some of the issues with folks camping in terms of assaults in that perspective as well, which is another thing that the city's addressing with the camping and trying to work on housing. But I think downtown is really, that's the crux of it. On top of that, you've got a lot of residential units moving into downtown that weren't there before. So you've got a confluence of entertainment and bars, et cetera, and residents, and they're all trying to kind of work together or live together.
And as far as Beat 5, it's looking like there's almost 3 times the amount of crime as downtown or even some of the other areas. What's driving crime there, and is there any concern about that?
Well, 5. Yeah. Let me get them on page 5 here. Well, the biggest driver in 5, actually, crime-wise, is shoplifting. You've got Shields in here, other stores, grocery stores, and all of that in that particular area. We've got Walmart, I believe, over there. Yep. So there's a lot of business in retail. That's the biggest increase. If you look at Beat 5, they've got a huge increase there, and it continues to go up. The burglary and the assaults are down, in a downward trend. So while it's geographically big, I mean, each area, again, kind of has its own particular crime issues. The other thing we would like to do, and part of our strategic plan, is really adding officers to our department so that we can place more officers within each beat at a given time and, again, help address some of these crime issues.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is just a clarification question on the beats. So you mentioned that the beats are based on calls for service and the crime. Now, are the beats like the label for 1 through 5? Is it just randomly placed, or is it just like labeled by where it's the highest number of crimes, or what is it numbered off of?
Now, if you just look, we start at 1, 2, 3, 4, and flip over to 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my second question, so as you mentioned, there is more apartments being built. There's, in the downtown area and other parts. And recently, the governor of North Dakota has basically revealed that North Dakota has been seeing a lot more people moving into North Dakota, and Fargo has also been like one of the places where a lot of people are moving in. Now, how would you like to see safety be like brought more into the Fargo area? You mentioned you want to get more officers in your department, but is there anything else that you think needs to be addressed on service or how you address certain areas?
Well, that's a large question. Many things, yes. Staff for our department, certainly to address, the crime issues and the things that that come before us. But we've got homeless issue, we've got mental health issue, we have addiction issues, we have jail issues. We're in a situation where, in many instances, we can't get people into jail. And we've got, we created our own booking station here at our own expense because it was such a egregious issue. That there's not an easy light down the tunnel. There's still a lot of work that has to be done in order to increase our county jail space, people that need to be hired, et cetera. But all of these issues actually are inextricably connected to each other. And unfortunately, we find ourselves at a time where we have a lot of very large issues that affect each other in various ways. And so we really need to have, as a city and a region, a very large strategic plan and thinking about how we address each of these. We can't just address one. One won't fix the other ones. And in some instances, if we focus on one, it makes the other ones worse. It's all connected in some fashion. So I think that's the biggest challenge for all of us, the police department and the city itself going forward.
Hi, Chief Sapolsky, Bobby Fallon, Valley News Live. Nice to officially meet you.
Yeah.
You kind of talked a little about it, like all the calls of service. One of my questions was going to be talking about the full jails, which you just kind of touched on. Thank you for that. Going into 2025, what beats and calls of service, whether it be aggravated assault, simple assault, which ones are most concerning to the department, and which ones are you looking forward or looking to address more in 2025?
Well, we've been focusing and we'll continue to focus on violent crimes, the gun crimes, things of that nature. We've been focusing on our sexual assaults. We've added a victim service specialist to our department over the last year as well to help address some of the gap that we had in dealing with our crime victims specific to sexual assault and domestic violence. because those domestic violence is a large portion of our assaults across the city, no matter where you live. And we've, brought in a lot of different technologies and partnerships. We've got the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, where we evaluate ballistic evidence and match it to other crime scenes in other cities. In fact, we just had a recent arrest yesterday, I believe, by our folks of a homicide suspect from Minneapolis. And so that person's in custody, but he was living in our area here. So we're going to continue to focus on that. I think we also have to pay attention to, what's happening with folks who might be from criminal gangs, either illegally in the country or what have you, as that develops. So we'll be watching that. Our real-time crime center and the continual step up of that in concert with other technology like our flock cameras, really a game changer for public safety in our city. We have cleared a number of significant felony crimes that we wouldn't have cleared as quickly as we have, or maybe not cleared at all, without the implementation of that technology. And so we want to continue to expand that. In some instances, we were adding some civilian staff to assist with that, but at the end of the day, boots on the ground to support the technology, and that's a big piece. I think we're doing, the other thing I think concerning to folks is burglaries, especially residential burglaries. And again, our IAU folks are on a regular basis looking for those connections, identifying those patterns and pushing them out to our cops so that they can pay attention and proactively kind of get in front of that. But again, we gotta have to have more cops out there in those beats. It ties in with our facility plan, because if you look at where we are right now, way up in beat 1, majority of the city is to the south and continuing to grow, right? By some point, we'll be at 100th Avenue. We have no police facility south of this one, which means everyone in these further south regions, every time they have to make an arrest, inventory evidence, do a report, or anything that requires coming to headquarters, they're traversing the whole city. So they're out of their beat. They're up here until they get done. And then when they get done, they got to drive back to their beat. And so we don't have the beat integrity that I would like to see, nor that I think that we need to enhance further our public safety platform. When we book a prisoner, on average, that's 2 cops, and on average, an hour. So we lose 2 cops for an hour every time we have to book a prisoner because we can't get them into the jail. So far since April, we booked about 320 people at our facility here. And the other thing that's happening is, we book and release because we can't hold them here, obviously. People on warrants, they get a new court date, they don't show up again. Our municipal court has to reissue the warrants. So far this year, they've reissued 127 warrants for folks that we've arrested. They got a new court date and they didn't show up again. And so it doesn't take long for people to understand that there's little to no consequences for some of the activity, and that would be my biggest concern. Because while we have a very safe city, if the belief out there is I can do pretty much whatever I want, and I don't ever have to show up for court or serve my sentence, you're going to start to see a much larger problem. And I think we have to bring back consequences and accountability. And whatever way that happens, we need to fix that.
Gotcha. And one more quick question for you is, looking at beat 2, bless you, you talked a little about calls for service down that included the downtown area. We know there have been some people over this past year, we've done stories that they feel downtown isn't safe. You've said that downtown is safe. Would you
Sure.
still double down
Yeah,
on that? And how-
absolutely. And here's the thing, and there's a difference between crime, reported crime, and perception of crime. And what happens, and if you talk to most of these folks, when you ask them why you don't feel safe, because that guy's sleeping in the doorway, or this person walked up to me and was talking to himself, or I felt threatened because of the way they were acting. We've got people that are walking around with significant mental health issues that should not be walking around on their own. They're not getting treatment, they're not on their meds, they can be completely, unpredictable, even when our cops deal with them. And so we deal with that on a regular basis, and it's not good for them, and it's not good for our cops, who have to also, from their mental health perspective, deal with these same folks day in and day out, for which we do not have adequate longer-term services or facilities to meet their needs. And that's all part of, addiction, mental health, housing, right? And so they're all connected. That gives people a fear of crime, even though no crime actually committed. And so there's crime and there's fear of crime, and fear of crime often has a greater effect on people's psyche. So we totally understand that, but we also think it's important to put the facts out there identify the problem as now let's work on the solution, which is something that the city's engaged in terms of the homeless issue and mental health issues, and we're trying a number of different things to try and address all of those. But again, I think if you don't address them as a one big large problem with many components, then it's not going to work well.
Hi, Noah Losing with WDAY. Nice to meet you. Just one quick question for you. Overall, when you look at the beat numbers, it seems like they're going down as far as burglary, aggravated assault, calls for service, those sorts of things. My question to you is, why do you see that trend going down, as we look at the graph even from 2022, and where are your confidence levels at as far as those numbers continuing to go down, and what sorts of measures are you guys doing to do that?
Well, my confidence level, I think, is based on what we do next. I just talked about this whole jail issue, and I firmly believe that if we don't get on this and something's not done, we're not going to continue to keep our head above water, because people are going to continue to be involved in these crimes, not serve their sentence, et cetera. Once the belief is that there's no accountability or consequences, the game's over. We are seeing felons not getting into jail. We've had lately just an instance where a person was in violation of their parole. When you violate your parole, generally that means you're supposed to go back to prison. That individual went to the county jail and within 2 days was released because the state penitentiary would not take the prisoner and the county jail was full. And we ran into that person a few more days after that in a drug investigation. So I think that that is an important piece that people need to recognize. You need to be talking to their legislators about, because this is a crisis situation that will only get worse, and that will affect our safety down the road. We're still in a position, if something can be done, to keep that tide going in the right direction, but that's a big one. It correlates again with mental health and some of these other issues. We got to work on those things and make sure that their perception of safety is equal to the actual numbers, right? And so that's a bigger job, and that's part of this overall strategy on homelessness, housing, mental health.
And just one more question. Just looking at the overall beat numbers, I was looking at the slideshow. I saw it says 89,633 for 2024, but on the slideshow, I think it says 86,000. So is the one on the slideshow just maybe an estimation of the month of December and continuing on, or which number should we go
Are
with?
you looking at, which one are you looking at? Overall?
All Fargo police beats,
Okay, let's see what we
2024.
got here. Yeah, we don't have, it's not year-to-date. Are you?
Just on the slideshow, it says 89,633.
Let's see where we're at here. Oh, yeah. So the 89,000 is only through November, right? So when we add December in there, we're probably going to be about the same. I don't think we've got, that's calls for service. And remember, calls for service does not equate to crime, right? So those are calls. So we go on a lot of other calls in which there's no crime or no offense that we have to investigate. And that's a lot of like the mental health calls and all those types of things. Or maybe we go there and nothing's happening, or it's a public assist and there's no crime, we help someone out, that kind of thing. So again, that's just keeping in mind the difference between calls for service and reported crime. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Anything else crime related? Okay. Otherwise, I know Camp Christensen is all excited to get up here and talk about traffic.
So we requested some similar information in past years after some allegations have came up that downtown was more dangerous, and we're told that this data wasn't available. Although you said that setting up beats is based on calls for service and crime, and so I was wondering if you can maybe clarify why that data wasn't available to the public, or if there is something that you were looking at that was
Yeah,
helping.
actually, it's all good question. And this has been a almost 2-year adventure, year and a half adventure. And we didn't have the ability to put it in this kind of a format other than bulk numbers, because we're still working with our Tyler Tech as our RMS company, I guess. In their ability to interface with the technology that our analysts are using in order to create data like this and pull out and drill down further into different crime categories. And so even today, we're not 100%. We're probably 90%, would you say, or yeah, 90% to having that completed. And that's going to save them a lot of manual work right now. In fact, we postponed this a couple times already. 2 days ago, we had a complete IT catastrophe, and data was lost and our analysts stayed late to try and fix it, and then we discovered another issue because we want to make sure that we're looking this over carefully before we push it out to the public, because we know we're not 100% on our IT functionality yet. But these are things that we've all brought in over the past couple of years. Captain Alfeld's the commander over that area in his division, and they're pulling a lot of weight in terms of all that info. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over to Captain Christensen, and we'll talk about traffic safety.
All right, thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. Like the Chief mentioned, my name is Matt Christensen. I'm the captain in charge of our Neighborhood Services Division. That's the division that also oversees our newly implemented traffic safety team, which is kind of what I'm going to give you the highlights of today. Kind of give you an update. So our traffic safety team was implemented on September 9th. We initially started it with 4 officers. It's authorized to have 6 through a grant. We couldn't fully staff it at the time based off of staffing needs for patrol and responding to calls for service. But on January 6th, we switched into our new year with staffing levels at that point. We'll be able to fully staff it at six personnel. In addition to the Neighborhood Services Division, our traffic safety team is responsible for, obviously, traffic enforcement throughout the city. The nice thing with our traffic safety team is that that's their sole focus. And I'll kind of walk through what that's looked like here over the last few months. But the big thing is targeting those dangerous driving behaviors. Over the past year especially, we've gotten some attention as far as complaints related to traffic stuff. So that's kind of where this traffic safety team came from, and to implement that and to give us that resource to really focus on those things to keep our streets safe. In addition, we want to conduct traffic enforcement in key areas of the city. We'll work through that with our intelligence and analysis unit as they gather data throughout the city to kind of identify where those problem areas are based off of complaints, and then information through various other forms of intelligence that we get, so we can really focus those efforts and have an impact on the safety of our streets. So to kind of show you the impact this team has had and be transparent with our community, kind of show what we're doing to address these traffic safety concerns, I just kind of want to go over what this first 90 days of this team has looked like. So as you can see, it's September. This is just the data for the 4 traffic safety officers. This isn't department-wide. I'll show you some of those numbers here in a minute. But these 4 officers on this team did 449 traffic stops in September, issuing 436 citations. In October, you can see 419 traffic stops with 409 citations. And then in November, 392 traffic stops with 386 citations. Like I said, this is based off just those 4 officers. They do a really good job of kind of enforcing those dangerous driving behaviors and ordinances in our city. So these are kind of the statistics that you can see. Traffic stops since the implementation of this team has increased. I'll kind of show you the from September on here in a minute. But in 2024, you can see our traffic stops have increased significantly. Same with citations. Dangerous driving is a big one. Like I said, that's our focus, since those are the ones that create the most issues for the safety of our citizens on the roads. So we've really been focusing on those dangerous driving or ordinances, I should say. And then traffic complaints, as you can see, over the last couple of years, they've actually started to go down. Traffic complaints are great. We need that from the public to work with us. I mean, they know their neighborhoods better than we do. Until we get those resources like the chief had mentioned and getting that good beat integrity with the officers in there on a regular basis. So the information from the public based off of what they see is good for us. And where we kind of really benefit from this traffic safety team is now we can really focus our efforts, where before, if we get a traffic complaint and an officer in that beat is busy on a call, there's higher priority things that they have to deal with. It might be a really long time before they can even get in that area. Whereas our traffic safety team can really focus their efforts just based off of traffic information. So this is the comparison since September, year to date. You can see the impact that our traffic safety team has had just based off of traffic stops. So you can see we're much higher since September than when we started from the years previous. In October and November for those first 90 days. They've had a huge impact, and I anticipate that's even going to get greater as we add our 2 people in January and then start to incorporate some other tactics as well. This is just a citation comparison as well. As you can see, those go up. All right, so the dangerous driving habits, I'll kind of talk through these a little bit. Like the chief mentioned, these are obviously meant for a deterrent to try to keep our streets safe. When people violate these, we want to actually have an impact and try to change that behavior. But unfortunately, currently, like careless driving is a $60 fine, non-criminal. Distracted driving, let's pull them all up here. So distracted driving, that's non-criminal, $200 fine. That's for when people are on their phones, that kind of stuff when they're driving. Drag racing, again, non-criminal. Exhibition driving, or excuse me, drag racing is a $100 fine. Exhibition driving is a $50 fine. Racing is a $100 fine. And then reckless driving, obviously that's a little bit more significant, a little more serious. That's a $500 fine and a court appearance. But those fines obviously don't do a whole lot to deter, but we do as much as we can, trying to enforce those, making sure we're issuing those citations. We don't give warnings typically for those types of behaviors just because of the significance that those have on the safety of our streets. So that's really what the traffic safety team tries to focus their efforts on, finding those, identifying where the problem areas in town where people like to do those things, and then focus our efforts there and allocate those resources for that. These are the citations for dangerous driving since traffic safety team started. You can see there's a huge increase in that, which kind of, I would say, illustrates our focus on that with the traffic safety team. All right, like the chief mentioned, fleeing in motor vehicle, we have a huge issue with this. Granted, like the chief said, someone flees from us on a traffic stop. You can see in the graph there's they're the reasons for stop initially, and then they flee, which would be an additional charge, obviously. But when someone is getting pulled over, obviously they were violating a traffic ordinance, causing an issue for our city and the safety. And now if they flee from us, they're making it even less safe. Like the chief alluded to, depending on the situation, typically we aren't going to pursue someone because that also increases danger to the public based on time of day, traffic volume, area of town, all that kind of stuff. So we try to be very cognizant of that. But with that, we try to get as much information on that vehicle so that we can try to track that down and take some enforcement action on that later. However, if we don't know who the driver was, but we know who the owner is, but we can't hold the owner responsible, that kind of limits our ability to be able to enforce that kind of stuff. So that's kind of our goal, like the chief alluded to, as far as the legislative changes. Crash data, I'll just talk about this really quick. This is just kind of a map that shows where the major crash areas are. In 2024, we've had 590 injury crashes, just under 3,500 property crashes for a total of just over 4,000. Again, our traffic safety team is really going to try to identify those problem areas, work with our engineering department to find out if that's something that needs to be changed regarding signage or traffic flow, or if it's just an area of town where there's people that are just constantly disobeying the law, and take enforcement action on those. So utilizing this data, working with our intelligence and analysis unit to try to identify those areas, then work with that traffic safety team to really allocate those resources to try to get those to come down. Because obviously that's another public safety issue for our community. And typically, as everyone here knows, in the winter months those increase, just based off of weather, the streets and stuff like that. So our traffic safety team also is going to work tirelessly to try to bring those numbers down as well. And if there certainly are times where those dangerous driving ordinances or behaviors might contribute to this type of stuff as well. One thing just with the intelligence, so traffic complaints, things that we can find out as far as where areas of town, like I mentioned, to try to allocate those resources. These are some that we've found so far just in our first 90 days that we've really focused on and had a huge impact on. You can kind of see them listed there. Just different areas of town, typically higher volume traffic areas. And when people are speeding, doing those reckless driving or careless driving, driving while distracted, those types of things in those heavy traffic areas, that certainly increases the risk to the public safety. So we want to really focus on those areas and have that enforcement impact and try to change that behavior and bring those numbers down. And our traffic safety team definitely had huge impact on those areas as well. One thing that I do want to talk about, just to kind of give you some idea, some notable success stories that our traffic safety team had. These are just a few of many, but on one occasion we intercepted a vehicle going 70 miles an hour in a 30-mile-per-hour residential zone. That driver was cited for reckless driving. One driver was found doing 55 in a 20-mile-per-hour school zone at one of our elementary schools. Another driver was stopped going 80 in a posted 30-mile-per-hour zone. It also happened to be near a park where there was children playing. And that driver was actually driving under the influence and was arrested for felony driving under the influence. So we're definitely having an impact, definitely making a difference with this team. And I'm certainly excited to get our the other 2 officers here in the beginning of January to continue working on that. In addition, as you can see here, I'm sure you guys have all heard about the flock camera system, but that has been another very valuable tool for us. Certainly when people flee, if we can get them caught on a flock camera to get the plate, if the officer didn't see it, depending on how the situation went. Even if there isn't a plate on it, our flock camera system can search vehicles based on what they look like, color, type of vehicle. And we've had a lot of success with that as well, trying to identify where those vehicles went, who they belong to, and try to handle it that way as well. Because like I said, typically we aren't going to pursue those because that just increases the danger as well. So that's been a very big success for us, and we're excited to continue to try to expand that. So looking ahead, like I said, we're excited to add those additional 2 officers here in January. They'll start on January 6th. We're going to continue to utilize a variety of tactics. One big one for us is just being present so that people see us. That's obviously a deterrent, but that's only one piece of this. There's also times where it might be valuable for us to utilize lower profile tactics, whether that be our motorcycles, unmarked vehicles, to really try to track that and have an impact on that behavior, so that if it continues on and they don't see a cop and they just keep doing what they were doing, now if we have that low profile tactic, now they know that just because they don't see a cop car doesn't mean the police aren't there, and try to have that impact as well as we move forward. Another thing is just some engagement. I'm sure you guys have all seen the groups of motorcycles that travel about the city in the summertime. Having our traffic safety team make contact with those people and engage with them, and certainly try to build some relationship with them to kind of explain to them the dangers of what they do when they're driving recklessly. Same thing with the street racer groups, if you will, those sport type cars that drive around in big groups and go to different, usually lower populated areas of the town, but they might be doing some dangerous driving, not only to risk to the public, but themselves. So having our traffic safety team members locate where those people like to congregate and just do some engagement with them and reach out to them and try to build that rapport, and just try to make sure that they're doing things safely. It's not that we don't want them to enjoy their vehicles, but they need to do it safely on our city streets, obviously, within the parameters of our city ordinances and laws. And then to continue to push for legislation like the chief mentioned, that'll be big for us as well, and gathering data like this to present and show, I think will be very important. So in conclusion, I would just say that I think we've made some really good strides. I'm very excited with what our team has done. We have outstanding officers that do that. In addition to them, it's certainly still an expectation of our whole patrol division and neighborhood services to do traffic enforcement, and they do a good job of that as well when they can. But as you see, we have a high number of calls for service as well that take priority for our patrol officers. So having this traffic safety team has been very beneficial, and I'm excited to see what 2025 brings with this group. So with that, I'll take any questions that you guys have for me.
Hi, Bobby Fallett, Valley News Live. One thing I just kind of was hoping if you can clarify was, when a pursuit starts to happen, when you deem it unsafe, what are some of the factors that you guys deem it unsafe? Is it reaching a certain amount of speed, kind of the certain terrain? What exactly constitutes that? And when do you guys exactly make the call of, this is unsafe, let's call this off?
Sure. So we have a whole policy basically related to traffic or vehicle pursuits. The main thing is the severity of what the violation was initially. If it's just they had expired tabs, I mean, that certainly wouldn't rise to the level of something we would pursue for. If it's someone that we know just committed a serious aggravated assault, we think they might go out to harm others, that's someone that we might potentially pursue. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, whether that's time of day. Like I said earlier, if there's a lot of cars on the road, us chasing someone through that, is the risk of someone else getting to a crash or hurting someone else is extremely high. So we take all of that into account, whether it's weather, if the roads are icy, there's rain, location, all that kind of stuff we take into account. And ultimately it falls on the officer that initiated the stop to make that decision. But they have to go through a several step process when they make that decision, notifying the shift commander over the radio, identifying the speeds that they're traveling, all of that kind of stuff. And that can certainly, the supervisor can also decided that they need to terminate that, but ultimately the initial decision is on the officer. But we certainly train that a lot. We talk about that policy a lot because that's obviously an important one. So there's a lot of things that go into making that decision, but we certainly don't want to increase the risk to the public based off of actions that we take. Because if they flee from us trying to stop them again them pulling over is very low. And then if we do pursue them, we need to make sure we have a good plan of how we're going to make this pursuit stop. And we don't want it to be that they crash into somebody else or something like that. So there's a lot that goes into it for sure, if that answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay, I have two questions.
Okay.
So how long do you guys, like, are you guys out there checking like all these beats and areas where there's like a lot of, traffic safety issues?
How long are we out there? Or?
Yeah.
So we're out there 24/7. I mean, we work 24/7. Police department, as a police department, our traffic safety team works kind of a flexible schedule. We try to put them out when there's higher volume of traffic. Having them work at 3 in the morning probably isn't going to be real beneficial. That's not to say we wouldn't do that if there's something, we have information that we need to do some enforcement during that time of day, but we try to keep them focused on the traffic areas like, at the rush hour type times, and things like that. So we try to be strategic about where we do that. When school's in session, we put them in the school zones before and after school, stuff like that. So we just try to utilize them the best that we can to have the biggest impact.
Okay, and now you mentioned that currently you have 4 officers, and that in January you'll be adding 2 more officers to the traffic safety team. Now, do you think this is enough amount of officers to really identify and be able to control these areas that have like issues with traffic and drivers who are like recklessly driving? Or do you think that there needs to be more done? Because what we have seen from the data is that you guys have pulled over and done more traffic stops within since 2022. It's jumped ever since you guys created the traffic team. Now, do you think that there needs to be more, or you think with the addition of the 2 more officers that you'll be able to maintain the amounts that you want to keep everything safe?
So the simple answer is we need a lot more. I mean, we could have a whole division of traffic safety officers out there, which would be ideal. 6 is a super small number, but it's what we have. Like the chief mentioned earlier, we have a strategic plan that we've been working on, and as part of that, it's adding a lot more cops to the street. And that's in every part of this department, whether that's patrol, beat officers, traffic safety, investigations. We just need more people as fast as our city is growing. So no, 6 is definitely not enough, but we've definitely had an impact, which is why we're trying to be strategic about where we place them, where we allocate them. But ideally, we'd like to have them out there 24 hours a day as well, and a lot more of them.
It's probably back of mind since we're in the winter months, but could you give an update on street racing, particularly with cars, not just motorcycles, and how you feel if there's any progress going on in trying to prevent that or educate the public on that?
Sure. So obviously during the winter months, like you said, it's less. A lot of that comes from, like I said, we're going to be trying to engage with them. They obviously congregate typically in the warmer months, and trying to find where they're at and talk with them about that stuff to educate them. But also, as we've seen complaints from the public about where they're traveling and what times of days they typically are there, that is all going to help us enforce that kind of stuff more. And again, what would help with that is having more traffic safety team members out there as well. I don't know if that answers your question. All right. Anything else, Chief?
Thank you for your attendance. One last piece, and Catherine might have mentioned this, but just to understand that the traffic safety team is completely proactive. They aren't taking calls for service. That's what the grant, we got the grant through the feds to do that. And I think from the community perspective, it's important to know that when we have resources, when we get resources, we have results. And so as we continue to seek to build a department as needed, there should be a confidence level within the community that we are doing the right things for the right reasons, and we're putting our resources to work, and we have something to show for it. So really tremendous work on all of that throughout the department. Thank you very much for your attendance. If you happen to have questions going forward, we've got Ty Schonert, who you may know as our new PIO. I would encourage you to reach out to him if you have questions about either terminology or a particular situation. We'll give you as much information as we can. But again, going back to making sure that we are using correct terminology on the same page, want to work with all of you on that as well. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a good Christmas.